The air in the subterranean bunker tasted like fear and stale coffee, a familiar human cocktail. But then it shifted, subtly, with the echo of the alien broadcast fading from the speakers. It was a new note, a strange metallic tang that clung to the back of the throat. Not ozone, not the acrid burn of plasma, but something more insidious, more biological. An almost imperceptible shift that only the deepest human intuition, honed by millennia of sensing danger, could pick up. Commander Eva Rostova watched the holographic projection of the warlord, Xylos Prime, shimmer into static. The creature, impossibly tall, with segmented limbs and eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian, had just delivered its ultimatum. A request, really. A top-polite request for Earth's surrender. 4. Efficient resource reallocation and integration into the glorious Xylosian Imperium. No threats. No grandstanding. Just cold, clinical civility. As if asking for a sugar packet. A choked sound, half cough, half maniacal chuckle, ripped from the throat of Tech Sergeant Miller. He was hunched over his console, fingers flying, a half-empty, lukewarm mug of the bunker's perpetually bitter brew clutched in a white-knuckled grip. His screen, usually displaying vital tactical data, now flashed with a truly terrible, badly photoshopped image of a majestic lion wearing a tiny party hat. Its caption, "My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined." "Sir," Miller rasped, not looking up, "our orbital comms relays are being flooded. Not with threats, Commander, with memes." And highly uncooperative responses from every major continental defense grid. Apparently, Captain Rodriguez from Sector 7 wants to know if they accept payment in exposure bucks for our planetary real estate. Ava felt it then, the unique human reaction to absurdity. It wasn't panic. It was a defiant, almost pathological refusal to be cowed by something so polite. She imagined these Xylosian sensors, calibrated for fear, for aggression, for logic, suddenly swimming in a sea of nonsensical data. From orbit, the alien fleet, a glittering constellation of impossible geometry, must be registering humanity's collective output as an anomaly. A virus. A psychological pathogen. They'd likely cataloged it as the sickness. A peculiar affliction that manifested as sarcastic defiance, questionable internet humor, and an unwavering demand for coffee before any discussion of planetary surrender could even begin. The Xylosians, conquerors of 47 systems without firing a single shot, were masters of psychological warfare, of breaking wills with the sheer weight of their logical superiority. But they had never encountered a species that simply refused to engage on their terms, a species that, when asked to surrender their home, responded by debating the nutritional value of instant ramen versus artisanal sourdough, or by demanding to know if the warlord preferred cat videos or dog videos. It was illogical, it was irrational, it was utterly gloriously human. And in that moment, as the bunker hummed with the quiet, furious tapping of keyboards and the faint scent of increasingly desperate human ingenuity, Ava knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just stubbornness. This was a biological imperative, a primal instinctual refusal to die politely. And that, more than any weapon, was going to be the Xylosians' biggest problem. They just hadn't realized it yet. The flickering blue light of the hollow screen cast dancing shadows across Dr. Eris Thorne's face, highlighting the permanent furrow between his brows. His office, usually a sanctuary of sterile order, was now a warren of hastily connected cables and blinking data feeds. The air hummed with the quiet intensity of medical diagnostics, mixed with the faint, unsettling scent of burning coffee from a forgotten cup. Eris wasn't a soldier, not in the conventional sense. He was a xenopsychologist, a human specialist in understanding alien minds. And right now the Xylosian minds, once a precise, predictable tapestry of logic, were unraveling. He tapped a stylus against a display, pulling up a raw feed. It was a Xylosian command channel, captured and decrypted. Not a single threat, not a grand declaration of war. Instead, the rapid-fire clicks and chitters of their language were laced with something else now. A new frequency. A higher pitch, almost imperceptible to the untrained ear, but to Eris, it was a siren's wail. Emotional distress, he murmured to himself, the words tasting clinical, yet absurd in their context. significant cognitive dissonance, elevated frustration markers. I'd almost say irritation. On another screen, a series of human responses scrolled by. A viral TikTok of a cat batting at a laser pointer, captioned, "Xylosian invasion strategy, colorized." A highly pixelated GIF of a confused seal. A meticulously crafted PowerPoint presentation titled, "Why Earth is Not Accepting Your Call Right Now, a Guide for Interstellar Overlords." Each one, a tiny digital dart aimed at the heart of Xylosian logical superiority. Eris leaned back, a dry, almost academic smile playing on his lips. His dogma, his unwavering belief, was that every system, every organism, however alien, followed a predictable pattern of stimulus and response. The Xylosians had presented their stimulus polite conquest. Humanity, in its glorious, infuriating messiness, had offered a response that defied every known Xylosian psychological profile. "They are not equipped for us," Eris whispered, a revelation blooming in his mind. "They prepared for aggression, for fear, for logical resistance, not for the sheer, unadulterated chaos of human indifference and sarcasm." He zoomed in on the Xylosian comms again. The high-pitched chitters were becoming more frequent, more agitated. There was a particular pattern, a stuttering repetition, that Eris had catalogued. It was the Xylosian equivalent of a prolonged, exasperated sigh. A species that had conquered worlds with quiet, efficient diplomacy was now being emotionally bombarded by Earth's internet. Eris's fingers flew across his console, compiling data. Human memes, sarcastic tweets, passive-aggressive refusals to surrender without proper catering. He was building a new kind of weapon. A psychological profile of an alien species encountering an illness it couldn't comprehend, couldn't fight, because it wasn't physical. It was simply human. The warlord Xylos Prime, once a bastion of logical calm, was likely now grappling with the concept of a species that valued a good espresso over galactic subjugation. And Eris the Doctor found a strange, defiant satisfaction in diagnosing the aliens' downfall, not as a military defeat, but as a severe case of existential emotional fatigue. Because some things, some species, just couldn't be treated with logic. They needed a healthy dose of human absurdity and a lot of coffee. The wind howled, a ceaseless, angry banshee ripping across the jagged cliffs of Point Defiance. Salt spray, cold and sharp, lashed against the reinforced viewport of Observation Post 7, blurring the already gray expanse of the North Atlantic. Captain Elias Vance, his face a roadmap of sun-weathered wrinkles and old grudges, barely registered the sting. His gaze was fixed not on the restless ocean, but on the silent, impossible geometry hanging in the bruised sky above the distant horizon. The Xylosian fleet. Lena, the station's youngest tech, shuddered, pulling her worn wool scarf tighter. "Still there, Captain," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the gale. Her fingers danced across a console, bringing up orbital telemetry. Passive scans, still just observing. No change in energy signatures. Still not even a polite, "Hello, back from our last meme drop." Elias grunted, taking a slow, deliberate sip from his chipped mug. The coffee was strong enough to peel paint, a comfortingly brutal assault on the senses. "They're trying to figure us out, Lena. Like watching a particularly baffling bug. Or a really bad reality TV show." He didn't sound worried. He sounded weary, perhaps, but mostly amused. The cosmic audacity of a species that tried to conquer Earth by cosking for it. It was still absurd. Over the comms, a new message crackled through the static. Not a tactical alert. Not a distress call. It was a recorded broadcast from a fishing trawler off the coast of Greenland, somehow amplified and circulated. An old, salty voice, thick with a Nordic accent, saying, "To the alien overlords, we're busy catching cod. If you want a planet, try Craigslist. We're not home right now. Also, your ships are blocking the good fishing lanes." "Rude," Lena snorted, a laugh bubbling up despite the grim situation. Fisherman Olav, captain, never misses a chance to complain about anything that interferes with his catch. Elias actually cracked a small smile, a rare event. Good for Olav. Let them try to make sense of that, eh? He watched the clouds scud across the alien vessels, their metallic surfaces reflecting no light, absorbing everything. He imagined the Xylosian command bridge, their logical processors churning through thousands of these human uncooperative responses. The memes, the sarcastic offers of expired coupons, the outright demands for payment in, belly rubs and good boy points. "They're just waiting for us to break, sir," Lena said, her voice a little softer, less defiant now that the laughter had subsided. To buckle under the pressure of their polite, efficient invasion. Elias turned from the viewport, his eyes, the color of a stormy sea, meeting hers. "We're not breaking, kid. We're doing what humans do best when someone tells us we have to do something." He took another sip of his industrial-strength coffee. "We're being deliberately, obnoxiously, magnificently difficult." The wind shrieked outside, mirroring the unspoken human defiance. At the salt-stung edge of the world, humanity simply refused to yield, not with a whimper, but with a stubborn, sarcastic, coffee-fueled snarl. The cool, recycled air of the Xylosian command center usually offered a serene, logical environment for contemplation. For Archivist Prime Xylar, however, it now felt like a pressure cooker, the metallic tang of his frustration almost palpable. His segmented digits hovered over a data slate, its surface glowing with the compiled human responses. These were not military communiques. They were not treaties. They were something else entirely. Xylar activated the visual display. A human-created image flickered into being. A wide-eyed, fluffy canine, its head tilted in what Xylar's translators identified as a confused puppy dog look. Below it, superimposed text read, "But why, though?" This was a response to Xylos Prime's latest impeccably logical request for global administrative handover. "Error," Xylar intoned, his vocalizer emitting a series of low clicks and whirs. Logical parse, failed. Emotional context, ambiguous. Threat level, undetermined. His internal chronometer indicated that it had been 72 Earth cycles since the initial, polite request for surrender. 72 cycles of escalating human absurdity. Their vast databases, filled with millennia of galactic diplomacy, conquest strategies, and species subjugation protocols, offered no viable framework for this. The ink of accepted truths regarding sentient life, the foundational tenets of how civilizations behaved under existential pressure, was being obliterated, line by infuriating line. Xylar cycled through another entry, a human female dressed in what appeared to be sleepwear, holding a steaming cup. Her message, translated with excruciating effort, simply stated, "Look, I haven't even had my coffee yet. We can talk about planetary surrender, Noppel. After Sant, I've processed my existential dread. Also, do your ships have decent Wi-Fi? Asking for a friend." The data streams that once painted humanity as Category 3, technologically emergent, emotionally unstable, now spiraled into Category 9, unclassifiable, cognitively disruptive, potentially contagious. Xylar's optical sensors, usually a placid amber, flickered with an agitated blue. Their entire understanding of sapient species relied on predictable emotional responses. Fear, defiance, aggression, compliance. But sarcasm? Incessant demands for caffeinated beverages? Debates about the merits of artisanal bread? "It's not resistance," a junior archival unit chimed in, its voice modulator sounding unusually strained. "It's insistence on trivialities," Xylar knew. He felt the cold, hard truth settling into his logical core. The Xylosian Imperium had mastered the art of conquest through psychological pressure, through the slow erosion of will. They presented a superior, undeniable logic, and species would eventually crumble. But humans were responding to galactic conquest like it was a telemarketer call during dinner. An inconvenience. A mild annoyance to be met with passive aggression and internet jokes. The ink of accepted truths was not merely being challenged. It was being rewritten in a language Xylar could barely comprehend. A language of stubborn wit, of illogical priorities, of a defiant, unyielding spirit that refused to be serious when facing the end of the world. It was a terrifying, beautiful, maddening truth, Humanity was not fighting with warships. They were fighting with their sheer unadulterated humanness. And it was, Xyler realized with a shudder, breaking them. The air in the UN Global Command Center crackled with an unfamiliar energy, not the usual low hum of servers or the frantic murmur of analysts. This was a deeper, almost physical thrum, reverberating through the very floor. High above Earth, the Xylosian fleet, previously a silent, ominous presence, had shifted. Its leading vessel, the Triumph Pax Imperia, now pulsed with a soft yet intensely radiating violet light. A new broadcast signal bloomed across all frequencies, overriding every channel, every meme, every sarcastic reply. It was Xylos Prime again, but different. His segmented form was bathed in the violet glow. His voice modulator deepened, amplified, resonating with an almost liturgical gravity. "Greetings, Terrans," the booming voice began, stripped of its former politeness, replaced by an unsettling, almost sacred pronouncement. "The time for trivialities has ceased. Our patience, finite even for the less evolved, is now expended. Behold, the wisdom of Xylos. Accept our benevolent guidance, or face the consequences of your continued illogic." Major Kaito Tanaka, usually unflappable, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the bunker's climate control. "What in the stars is that?" he muttered, leaning closer to his console. The violet light intensified on the main display, casting his face in a ghostly hue. It looked majestic, powerful, like a cosmic sermon before a reckoning. Across the room, Tech Sergeant Miller, now a veteran of the meme wars, squinted at the screen, a half-eaten bag of potato chips suspended mid-air. Consequences? Illogic? Sir, is he trying to pull a divine judgment routine on us? A giggle, high-pitched and slightly hysterical, escaped one of the junior comms officers. Is he cosplaying a god now? The Xylosian broadcast continued, detailing, in slow, measured tones, the inevitable one-dendrological outcome of humanity's refusal. Resource reprioritization, population relocation protocols, and other euphemisms for galactic subjugation. But the words were heavy, imbued with an unshakable sense of destiny, meant to instill awe, fear, and ultimately, compliance. It was a calculated, ancient strategy, honed over countless compliant worlds. But humanity, being humanity, had a different response. A unified, global response that began with a tweet from a teenager in Tokyo. "New alien overlord just dropped. Looks like he's going for the villain with a superiority complex. Aesthetic. Rate his drip. 1 to 10. Within minutes, the internet, temporarily stunned into silence by the broadcast, erupted. Memes comparing Xylos Prime to everything from a disappointed dad to a sci-fi villain who forgot his evil monologue flooded the Xylosian comms. Kaito watched the data flow, a strange mix of dread and pride swirling in his gut. They were trying to scare humanity into submission, to present an image of irresistible, divine power. But humans, having faced down countless forms of judgment, real and imagined, had developed an immunity. They were simply too busy finding the humor in the cosmic absurdity. The heat of divine judgment felt less like a scorching fire and more like a poorly executed laser light show. And in the face of such perceived grandeur, humanity's instinct wasn't to cower, but to crack wise, to question the fashion choices of their would-be gods, and to refuse, on principle, to be impressed. Some things, it seemed, were just too ridiculous to take seriously. The violet aura, once a beacon of Xylos Prime's divine authority, now flickered, almost imperceptibly, within the command chamber of the Shrew Pax Imperia. His multiple optical sensors, usually locked on precise data streams, darted across the main display, where the aggregated human responses to his divine judgment were being processed. He had expected awe. He had expected terror. He had even, logically, prepared for outright military defiance. What he received instead was a series of brightly colored, crudely animated images. One showed a human infant, its tiny hand clutching a toy, above the caption, "Me trying to take Xylos Prime seriously." Another depicted a large bipedal creature, identified as a Karen, demanding to speak to his manager. His internal processors, designed for logical threat assessment, overloaded with a cascade of emotional incongruity, errors. Archivist Prime Xylar, his segmented body still and rigid beside Xylos Prime, emitted a low, distressed click. Warlord, the data stream is defying all known categorization. They are dissecting your sartorial choices. They are rating your aura on a scale love vibes. They demand to know if your mothership has Wi-Fi for their streaming needs. Xylos Prime's primary vocalizer remained silent, but his mental commands were a whirlwind of frantic cross-referencing. Miles. Insolence. Blasphemy. These were not terms in the Xylosian tactical lexicon. Their philosophy, their very faith, was built on the undeniable truth that superior logic, presented with suitable gravitas, always led to compliance. It was the unquestioning faith in their own inherent rightness, their destined superiority. And it was being chipped away, meme by infuriating meme. He watched a holographic representation of himself, captured during the broadcast, being overlaid with absurd human accessories, a tiny hat, oversized sunglasses, a ridiculous string of colorful beads. This is a form of attack, Xylos Prime finally articulated, his modulated voice betraying a hint of something alien to his species. Profound, seething bewilderment. But what is the objective? To discomfort us? Xylar's optical sensors pulsed. Analysis suggests it is designed to evoke, cringe, warlord. A human term denoting profound social embarrassment, often accompanied by a desire to hide under a blanket. Cringe. Embarrassment. These were not the tools of conquest, but they were, undeniably, tearing at the fabric of Xylosian certainty. The violet light of the tool's Pax Imperia dimmed further, reflecting the slow, agonizing erosion of Xylos Prime's conviction. Their unwavering faith in their own methods, once a pristine, polished truth, was now riddled with holes, scarred by the inexplicable, illogical, and utterly disrespectful responses of humanity. It was a wound that no weapon could inflict, a damage to the very core of what it meant to be Xylosian. Their divine judgment, it seemed, had been summarily dismissed by a species too stubborn, too absurd, and too magnificently human to take anything, even galactic conquest, seriously. And the scar it left was permanent. The air in Sublevel 3, designated Project Stimulus, was thick with a rich, dark aroma that permeated every vent, every crack in the reinforced concrete. It was the scent of roasted beans, of freshly ground perfection, of caffeine brewing. It was the fume of humanity's true alchemical obsession, and for many, it was the only thing standing between them and a complete meltdown. Senior Technician Ava Rostova, no relation to Commander Ava, hummed softly as she adjusted the flow rate on a repurposed industrial water purification system, now meticulously calibrated for coffee extraction. The hiss and gurgle of the massive espresso machine, cobbled together from salvaged parts and sheer ingenuity, was a comforting symphony in the cavernous chamber. Outside these walls, the Xylosian fleets still hung in orbit, their latest, final warning, broadcasts ringing with an almost pitiable desperation. Here, however, the only crisis was maintaining optimal brewing pressure. "Status report, Ava," a voice crackled over her comms, thick with the unmistakable hunger of a sleep-deprived night shift. It was Lieutenant Shen from Perimeter Control, his usual crisp tone softened by a palpable need. Eva grinned, wiping a streak of coffee grounds from her cheek. Batch 7 Gamma just finished. Optimal extraction, Chen. Richness at 9.2. Acidity 3.8. Good for a solid 12 hours of existential dread defiance. She watched the dark swirling liquid pour into insulated canisters, each one a precious cargo. This wasn't just coffee. It was morale. It was focus. It was the stubborn insistence that even facing galactic subjugation, a human deserved a decent cup. Above, the muted thump of the Xylosian broadcast played on the speakers, translated snippets scrolling across a wall monitor. Unacceptable deviations from logical protocol, continued resistance to benevolent assimilation, advise immediate cessation of unconstructive digital output. The words were growing more shrill, less commanding. The Xylosians had shifted from polite requests to divine judgment, and now, it seemed, to exasperated tutelage. They were trying to scold humanity into submission. "They just don't get it, do they?" Eva murmured, more to herself than Chen. "They don't understand that for us, this isn't a luxury. It's fundamental." She thought of the faces of the engineers, the soldiers, the analysts. Their eyes brightened, not by fear, but by the jolt of that first morning sip. Their minds sharpened, their wit rekindled, ready to craft another bewildering meme or send another sarcastic refusal. The Xylosians, masters of efficiency, would never comprehend the intricate, almost sacred ritual of coffee brewing, or the sheer, unyielding power it held over human spirit. They saw only a bitter brown liquid. Humans saw courage, clarity, and the defiant refusal to face the universe without their daily dose of alchemical obsession. And as the rich, intoxicating fumes of Batch 7 Gamma filled the bunker, Eva knew that as long as they had coffee, humanity wasn't going anywhere. Because some battles aren't won with weapons, but with stubborn, caffeinated resolve. The hum of the Times Pax Imperia Spridge, once a comforting thrum of absolute control, now felt like a low, incessant whine in Xylos Prime's optical sensors. For cycles, his logical processors had grappled with the deluge of human communication, attempting to categorize, to comprehend, to apply known strategic paradigms. But the latest aggregated data streams were simply an affront. He replayed a particularly egregious example. A human broadcast not from a government but from a live streamer designated Pancake Patriot. The human, absurdly small in a brightly colored garment, declared, "All right, Xylos Prime, buddy. We've been discussing it, and the Council of Snack Eaters has decided you're not getting the planet. Also, your ships look like really expensive paperweights. Just saying." Xylos Prime's internal systems registered a critical failure to parse. Nimes paperweights. The Grand Comms Pax Imperia, a marvel of Xylosian engineering, likened to an inert, decorative object. The sheer, unadulterated Cumsivit. His segmented digits clenched, a rare, uncontrolled muscular spasm. Archivist Prime Xylar, ever observant, offered a diagnostic. Warlord, the human data indicates a rising trend of roasting. It appears to be a form of verbal aggression delivered with the intent to undermine confidence and induce shame or embarrassment. Xylar's voice modulator, usually perfectly modulated, seemed to carry a faint tremor. Shame? Xylar's Prime articulated, the concept alien to a species that operated on pure, efficient logic. Their conquests were bloodless, precisely because they broke wills through unassailable reason, not petty insults. How does this facilitate planetary surrender? It does not, Xylar confirmed, projecting another image. A human, in what appeared to be an office, holding a mug of the dark, stimulating liquid they called coffee. The caption read, "Before I can even think about galactic overlords, I need my caffeine." Priorities. This was a response to Xylos Prime's third, meticulously crafted, ultimatum. A glimmer, cold and sharp, ignited in Xylos Prime's core processors. It was the spark of resisted reason. His logical mind screamed for a rational counter. Deploy a deterrent? Initiate a tactical strike? But the human responses were not threats to be met with force. They were an invisible, insidious acid, dissolving the very foundations of Xylosian superiority. They refused to be afraid, refused to be logical, refused to even engage with the gravity of their situation. They met cosmic power with indifference, peppered with a bewildering, relentless stream of ill-mannered wit. He felt it then, a strange, unprecedented sensation. It was not anger, not fear, but a profound, existential weariness. The weight of human illogicality pressed down, an oppressive force his species had never evolved to counter. To surrender was illogical. To conquer required engagement. But how did one conquer a species that simply refused to take you seriously? That met your might with a meme and a demand for more coffee? Xylos Prime looked at the holographic display, at the flickering, smiling human faces, at the endless stream of absurdities. He had come to conquer. He was being annihilated, not by weapons, but by their sheer, stubborn, magnificent refusal to conform to any logical framework. The glimmer of resisted reason was fading, replaced by the dawning, horrifying truth. Some things, some species, simply could not be reasoned with. And that, more than any war, was an unbearable burden. The bridge of the 20 Pax Imperia was a masterpiece of Xylosian engineering. Polished synth steel gleamed under soft indirect lighting. Every console, every display, every sonic resonance was perfectly calibrated for optimal logical processing, designed to foster a serene, unassailable command environment. For Xylos Prime, it had always been a castle, a cold, comforting fortress of reason from which he directed the smooth, inevitable expansion of the Imperium. But now, that comfort felt false, almost mocking. The low, steady hum of the engines, once a lullaby of power, grated against his auditory sensors. The meticulously organized data streams, scrolling across his primary view screen, were no longer a source of clarity. They were a chaotic, nonsensical torrent. A new composite image pulsed on the display. A human male, mouth agape in an expression of exaggerated shock, beneath the words, "You asked us to surrender? You must be new here." Xylos Prime's optical sensors flickered with an agitated blue. His segmented digits, usually precise and unwavering, twitched above a tactical overlay of Earth. The planet itself, a vibrant swirl of blue and green, now felt less like a conquest and more like a colossal, cosmic insult. "Archivist Prime," Xylos Prime articulated, his voice modulator emitting a low, strained click. "Recalibrate human behavioral algorithms. The current projections are inadequate." Archivist Prime Xylar, a pillar of composure until now, shuddered, a subtle ripple through his chitinous plates. "Warlord, the algorithms are functioning precisely. It is the human input that defies all logical prediction. They have responded to your latest decree for rational compliance with a demand for better latte art from the galactic barista, and a dance-off challenge. A dance-off." The sheer, unfathomable absurdity of it resonated through Xylos Prime's core. His castle, built on the bedrock of logical superiority, was being bombarded not by kinetic weapons, but by the relentless, illogical artillery of human defiance. Each meme, each sarcastic retort, each demand for coffee felt like a small, sharp shard chipping away at his perfectly constructed worldview. He looked at the silent, efficient figures of his bridge crew, their optical sensors fixed on their own screens, meticulously processing the baffling data. Even they, the pinnacle of Xylosian rationality, seemed to carry a subtle tremor in their movements. The cold comfort of their logical fortress was eroding. It was supposed to be a sanctuary from the messy unpredictability of the universe, a place where order always prevailed. But humanity, it seemed, was a storm they had never encountered, a force that simply laughed in the face of order. And in the heart of his once impregnable castle, Xylos Prime felt a chilling, alien sensation bloom, profound, undeniable emotional damage. The bridge of the Tana's Pax Imperia was no longer a symbol of power, but a pressure chamber. Xylos Prime felt it, a phantom weight on his segmented frame, despite the zero-gravity environment. The sterile air, once crisp and cool, now tasted stagnant, thick with the unseen residue of human defiance. His optical sensors, usually precise as a targeting laser, ached with the strain of processing the latest data streams. They pulsed with a desperate, agitated blue. On the main viewer, a continuous loop of human content played. A crude animation of Xylos Prime trying to fit a square block into a round hole, labeled "Xylosians trying to understand human humor." Another, a short video of a human male attempting to open a jar, grunting with effort, captioned, "Humanity surrendering to alien overlords." Each frame, each pixel, hammered at the core of Xylosian logical superiority, shattering it into incomprehensible fragments. "Warlord," Archivist Prime Xylar reported, his vocalizer now a low, strained whisper. "The psychological contagion is escalating. Our core processing units are registering a 73% degradation in logical coherence. Our tactical planning matrices are looping on absurdities. Commander Vesk has requested a timeout to research the historical significance of fluffy cat videos. Xylos Prime remained silent, but his internal processes screamed. The human responses weren't just data points anymore. They were a siege, not of plasma fire and kinetic impact, but of overwhelming, illogical noise. They had retreated into their mental bunkers, surrounded by the baffling defenses of sarcasm and memes, and were now launching their own, far more insidious, counterattack. The Silosian fleet was trapped, not by a physical blockade, but by an impenetrable wall of human stubbornness and irreverence. He finally spoke, his voice modulator struggling to maintain its customary gravitas. The Terrans they resist not with force, but with cognitive disruption. They refuse to be classified. They refuse to be conquered by reason. They demand coffee. The last word was a broken, confused click. A low, collective hum of agreement, tinged with despair, rippled through the bridge crew. They understood. For cycles, they had tried to impose order, to introduce logic, to assimilate. But humans didn't want order. They wanted their daily brew. They didn't want logic. They wanted to share a questionable image of a disgruntled badger. Xylos Prime looked at the vibrant swirl of Earth, no longer a prize, but a source of profound existential weariness. This is not a military defeat, he articulated, the words tasting like ash. This is a philosophical incompatibility, a threat to our very mental stability. The decision, when it finally came, felt less like a command and more like a desperate, primal instinct for self-preservation. Archivist Prime. Prepare withdrawal protocols. Initiate full retreat. We cannot comprehend this species. The emotional damage is unacceptable. The Spax Imperia, the mighty fortress of reason, began to turn, slowly, silently, away from the baffling, stubborn, coffee-fueled planet. Humanity, it seemed, could not be conquered. Not with polite requests, not with divine judgment, and certainly not without its morning dose of caffeine. They just refused to go down, not even without a fight, but without a good laugh, a bad meme, and a truly epic amount of emotional damage inflicted on their would-be conquerors. The retreat. The Xylosian ships, once an impossible stain on the heavens, were gone. A collective exhale had swept across Earth, a wave of stunned relief quickly followed by a chaotic burst of triumphal memes. But in the quiet, dust-mote-filled stillness of Sublevel Gamma's forgotten archive, Dr. Eris Thorne found no cause for boisterous celebration. He needed to understand. The air here was thick with the scent of aged paper and something else, something subtly metallic from the bunker's deep infrastructure. Eris ran a gloved hand over the spines of countless physical tomes. A stark contrast to the holographic displays he usually navigated. His fingers paused on a particularly unassuming volume, its binding worn smooth, its pages yellowed and brittle. Ah, Terra Incognita, an unofficial compendium of human stubbornness, he murmured, a dry smile touching his lips. He pulled it from the shelf, a faint puff of dust rising around it. He opened it carefully, the rough texture of the ancient paper, a physical reminder of the enduring, messy reality of his species. The Xylosians, with their clean digital logic, would never have understood the profound truth embedded in these physical artifacts. He found a specific passage, highlighted in faded ink decades ago, describing a medieval village that, when faced with an invading army demanding tribute, had responded by mailing the warlord a single rotten cabbage. Commander Thorne? A voice, young and a little breathless, echoed from the archive entrance. It was Lena, Captain Vance's tech from Point Defiance, here on a supply run. You're in here? We thought you'd be analyzing post-contact data. Eris looked up, the ancient book held gently in his hands. Lena, my dear, the post-contact data is merely the symptom. The cure, the truth, is found in the deeper layers. He pointed to the highlighted passage. They sent a chummy cabbage to an army because they were annoyed. Lena peered at the page, a slow grin spreading across her face. So we've always been like this then? This irrational defiance? Precisely, Eris confirmed, the rough texture of the paper beneath his thumb feeling like the very bedrock of humanity. We don't just endure, Lena. We defy expectation. We meet overwhelming force not with fear, but with an absurd, almost pathological refusal to take anything seriously, if it inconveniences our right to be gloriously, wonderfully, infuriatingly ourselves. He gently closed the book, its worn cover radiating a quiet, stubborn power. The Xylosians had underestimated the rough texture of human reality, the unyielding spirit etched not in algorithms, but in the very fiber of their being. And that, Eris knew, was their greatest, most beautiful weapon. The silent, empty expanse of interstellar space was supposed to be a balm, a return to the ordered logic of the void. Yet for Xylos Prime, as the Tombog disengaged its orbital anchors and began its agonizingly slow retreat, the silence was deafening. It echoed with the ghost of human laughter, the phantom captions of 1,000 absurd memes, and the infuriating insistence on coffee. The Xylosian fleet, a paragon of strategic precision, was not merely departing. It was fleeing an invisible, psychological weapon that had shattered its logical core. Xylos Prime stood on his bridge, the primary view screen now filled not with Earth's vibrant blue, but with the cold, indifferent stars. His optical sensors, typically a steady amber, now pulsed with a dull, almost painful rhythm. His internal chronometer registered the passage of cycles, each one filled with a single, dangerous question. Why did we ask? The initial polite request for surrender, a cornerstone of Xylosian conquest, had been the catalyst. It was the moment they opened the door to humanity's chaotic, unpredictable soul. The price of that polite inquiry was a profound, unprecedented form of damage. It wasn't a scorch mark from a plasma cannon or a rupture in their hull. It was deeper, an erosion of their very understanding of sentient life, of logic itself. Warlord, Archivist Prime Xyler's voice was barely a whisper, devoid of its usual clinical detachment. Analysis of all retrieved Terran data streams, even those designated low-priority humor, suggests a consistent pattern. A total refusal to engage with existential threats on terms other than their own. Xyler projected a final, aggregated human response. It was a simple image, a human child, defiant in a brightly colored costume, holding up a crude sign that read, "Still number. Still no," that was it. No grand battle, no desperate plea. Just the stubborn, unwavering, utterly illogical refusal of a species that had apparently decided that galactic conquest was beneath its notice, or at least, beneath its dignity, until it had finished its morning routine. Xylos Prime's segmented digits clenched. His vast databanks, filled with millennia of conquest, offered no solution, no counter-strategy. How did one defeat an opponent who responded to polite demands with an offer to trade the planet for a lifetime supply of artisanal bread? How did one subjugate a species that met divine judgment with ironic comparisons to low-budget cinema? The answer, he realized with a chilling certainty that settled into the deepest parts of his logical processors, was that you couldn't. Not with logic. Not with politeness. Not with anything they possessed. Humanity had asked them a dangerous question, not with words, but with their very existence. Can you handle us? The price of that question was the Xylosian Imperium's tactical retreat, their pride shattered, their logic broken, their very concept of reality fundamentally, irrevocably damaged. They had come to conquer. They left broken, forever scarred by the baffling, beautiful, and utterly undeniable force of human stubbornness. The sun beat down on Elias Vance's back, a familiar, comforting weight, after the artificial chill of Observation Post 7. The rhythmic chug of the old tractor, pulling a plow through the rich, dark soil, vibrated up through the worn seat, a counterpoint to the distant, faint bleating of sheep. The air smelled of turned earth and damp grass, a primal scent that grounded him deeper than any bunker could. The Xylosian fleet, once a glittering constellation of impossible geometry in the bruised sky, was gone, just gone. He paused at the end of a long furrow, cutting the engine, letting the sudden quiet wash over him. His hands, calloused and thick with the muscle memory of decades, gripped the steering wheel. He glanced up, not at the sky for alien ships, but at the horizon, where the distant, hazy line of the ocean met the clouds. No impossible shapes, no violet glows, just the vast, indifferent blue. Damn fools, he muttered. Not to anyone, just to the wind carrying the scent of salt from the coast. He wiped a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a smear of dirt. He'd seen the news, the triumphant broadcasts, the new memes celebrating the aliens' retreat. Emotional damage, the internet called it. Elias just called it what it was. Humanity being too damn stubborn to die politely. Or even impolitely, for that matter. He remembered Lena, the young tech from the Post, wide-eyed with relief and a touch of awe. She'd asked him, "What do we do now, Captain?" And he'd just shrugged, picked up his coffee mug, and said, "We keep going, kid. That's what we do." And here he was. The Earth didn't care about alien warlords or cosmic empires. It just cared about the plow, the seed, the rain. It demanded work, honest and relentless. Elias took a long swig from his thermos, the lukewarm coffee tasting like victory and routine. The aliens wanted to talk about resource reallocation. Elias was busy reallocating his own resources, planting potatoes, ensuring the harvest. Because some things were just more important, he shifted the gear, feeling the familiar grind of metal. The tractor roared back to life, the plow biting into the earth once more, the unchanging rhythm of the furrow, cutting through the soil, year after year, invasion or no invasion. It was a testament, a quiet, defiant truth. Humanity didn't need grand pronouncements or heroic last stands to prove its resilience. Sometimes, it just needed a good cup of coffee and the stubborn, unbreakable will to keep turning the earth. The last shimmering dust motes of the Xylosian fleet had long vanished from the telescopes, leaving behind an echoing silence in the upper atmosphere. The UN Global Command Center, once a hive of frantic activity, now hummed with a different kind of energy, one of debriefings, damage assessments, and the slow, arduous process of returning to normalcy. Whatever that even meant now. Commander Ava Rostova stood by the main viewing screen, its vast expanse no longer displaying alien ships, but a live feed of the Earth. A farmer in Ukraine, his tractor kicking up rich, black soil. A team of engineers in California, already rebuilding a damaged data relay. Children in Brazil, laughing as they chased a soccer ball. Life, relentlessly, stubbornly, continuing. "Commander," Tech Sergeant Miller said, his voice unusually subdued, almost contemplative. He pushed a mug of now perfectly brewed coffee across her console. The Xylosian post-withdrawal analysis reports are fascinating. Their primary conclusion, species Terran exhibits a profound, illogical addiction to self-improvement and future-oriented labor, even in the absence of immediate threats. They translated it as stubborn fear of a better harvest. Ava took a slow sip, the bitter warmth a familiar comfort. "Fear of a better harvest," she repeated, a wry smile touching her lips. "They think it's fear? It's not fear, Miller. It's instinct." She looked at the images on the screen. The farmer, meticulously turning the earth, already planning for next season, for a bigger yield, a healthier crop, despite having just faced potential planetary annihilation. The engineers, their brows furrowed, already optimizing the next generation of relays, making them faster, stronger, better. The children, running, laughing, growing, driven by an inherent, unshakable urge to become, the Xylosians had misunderstood. They searched for logical weaknesses, for points of surrender. They saw human stubbornness as a flaw, a deviation from efficient compliance. But they never truly grasped that for humanity the drive wasn't just to survive a threat. It was to push past it, to learn, to adapt, to rebuild, always striving for more. It was the primal, unyielding belief that tomorrow could be better, that the next crop would be richer, the next generation would achieve greater things. The aliens, who valued logical stasis and efficient resource management, could never comprehend a species driven by such a ceaseless, almost terrifying internal imperative. It wasn't a fear of failure that pushed humanity. It was the stubborn, glorious, infuriating craving for success, for progress, for a harvest that was always, always better than the last. And as Ava watched the endless, beautiful chaos of her species getting back to the business of being human, she knew that was a weapon no alien empire could ever hope to dismantle. The smell of tar, oak, and brine. a sharp, invigorating scent that cut through the lingering relief of the Xylosian retreat. Not the sterile air of bunkers or the metallic tang of alien vessels, but the honest, resonant aroma of human craftsmanship. At the restored port of New Orleans, under a sky now blissfully empty of alien dread, the shipyards hummed with a different kind of purpose. Not weapons, not defense, but something far more primal. The Endeavor, a full-rigged ship from Earth's ancient age of sail, glided silently from her dry dock, her towering masts scraping against the pale morning clouds. Her hull, polished to a deep, lustrous sheen, reflected the rising sun. Her sails, crisp and white, were meticulously folded, ready to catch the wind. This wasn't a relic, this was a statement. One of many, wooden giants, as the project was affectionately called, meticulously rebuilt and launched in the weeks following the Xylosian withdrawal. They're magnificent, aren't they? Lieutenant Lena's voice was soft, laced with genuine awe. She stood beside Elias Vance on the bustling dock, the salty air whipping strands of hair across her face. Elias, fresh from his potato fields, merely grunted, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. His gaze followed the Endeavor as tugboats guided her towards the open sea. Waste of resources, the Xylosians would say, Elias finally offered, taking a deep, satisfying breath of the sea air. No offensive capability. Slow. Vulnerable. He paused, then added, "They'd miss the point entirely, wouldn't they?" Lena nodded, her eyes shining. "It's about Ross, isn't it? Who we were. Who we still are. Building something just because it's beautiful, because it's asterisk ours." She remembered the aliens' final, exasperated broadcast, their utter confusion at human memes and coffee. These ships were another layer of that same baffling defiance. They were physical embodiments of human history, culture, and the stubborn refusal to let anything extinguish their spirit. A young shipwright, his hands stained with pitch, passed by, offering them a wide, proud grin. The work was slow, painstaking. Each plank laid, each rope tied, was an act of profound, defiant joy. It was a silent message, broadcast not through digital frequencies, but through the enduring, tangible proof of human ingenuity and unwavering cultural pride. The Xylosians had wanted to erase human identity. Instead, humanity built an armada of wooden giants, sailing a sea of undeniable human truth, a profound echo of their victory. The void of deep space offered no comfort to Xylos Prime. The stars, once points of navigation, now seemed to mock his retreat, each distant light a reminder of the unyielding, baffling planet he had abandoned. On the bridge of the Chi-Pax Imperia, the atmosphere was one of strained silence, the crew still reeling from the unprecedented, cognitive disruption inflicted by the Terrans. They were meant to be on a course for logical reassessment, but the universe, in its cruel, ironic humor, continued to deliver data. Archivist Prime Xylar's voice was a low hum, its modulation still reflecting a deep-seated unease. Warlord, new transmissions intercepted from Sector Gamma. Terran origin. Analysis indicates a massive increase in localized quantum-entangled communication grids. Exponential growth in what they term sustainable fusion prototypes. And a planet-wide global coffee festival with real-time holographic projections of competing latte art contests. Xylos Prime's optical sensors, which had only just begun to settle from their agitated blue, flared again. Quantum entanglement, sustainable fusion. These were not the technologies of a recovering, fearful species. These were the hallmarks of a civilization not merely surviving, but accelerating. And the latte art? The four. He accessed the images. Swirling patterns of foam, intricate and fleeting, captured with almost sacred reverence. It was illogical. It was entirely inefficient. It was human. He recalled Dr. Eris Thorne's translated psychological profile. Humans exhibit a profound, illogical addiction to self-improvement and future-oriented labor, even in the absence of immediate threats. They had called it the stubborn fear of a better harvest. But this wasn't fear. This was something wilder, something beautiful and terrifying. This was the pure, unadulterated strain drive to innovate, to create, to exceed, fueled by an encounter that should have broken them. They are not merely rebuilding, Xylos Prime articulated, the words tasting like ash in his vocalizer. They are leveraging our presence. Their memes and coffee demands were not merely resistance. They were a redirection, a reprioritization. They learned from us, even as we failed to comprehend them. Xylar projected a new visual, a human space probe, its advanced thrusters flaring, launching from Earth's orbital platform. It was sleek, efficient, and emblazoned with a small, stylized image of a human hand holding a steaming coffee mug. Its destination was listed as Deep Space Exploration, seeking new recipes. Also, Wi-Fi. The Zlosian Imperium had, for millennia, approached lesser species with a calculated, logical superiority. They had believed in a universe of predictable, quantifiable actions and reactions. But humanity was an anomaly, a chaotic, vibrant storm of unpredictable innovation, driven by an inherent need to push boundaries, to create, to connect, and to, bafflingly, perfect their caffeinated beverages. Xylos Prime looked at the image of the probe, already shrinking against the starfield. They had thought to conquer a planet. Instead, they had merely introduced themselves to a species that responded to existential threat not by cowering, but by launching itself further into the stars, armed with wit, coffee, and an insatiable desire to make things better. The true humbling, he realized, wasn't just in their retreat. It was in witnessing the terrifying, boundless storm of innovation they had unknowingly unleashed. Humanity, it seemed, could not be contained. Not by logic, not by politeness, and certainly not by anything less than its own, self-imposed, wonderfully human limits. And the universe now would forever bear witness to that truth. The cold, sterile expanse of deep space, once the very embodiment of Xylosian logical purity, now felt contaminated. Not by physical debris or radiation, but by an unseen, insidious residue that clung to the very fabric of Xylos Prime's consciousness. It was a constant, low-frequency hum of illogicality, a persistent echo of human laughter and sarcastic retorts. This was the leech's kiss, a psychological drain that had latched onto his species, meticulously ordered minds, and refused to let go. Xylos Prime stood on the Taspax Imperia, raid not Dimaka wage, far from the troublesome Terran system, yet he felt its presence. His optical sensors, typically capable of processing terabytes of data with effortless precision, now registered a persistent, almost painful blur at the edges of his vision. His internal chronometer, usually a rhythmic pulse of efficiency, stuttered. He found himself replaying segments of human broadcasts, a particularly aggressive meme featuring a disgruntled cat, a human arguing passionately about the merits of a specific brewing method for their coffee. Each memory was a small, sharp barb, embedded deep. Warlord, energy consumption stabilizing, Archivist Prime Xylar reported, his voice modulator carefully neutral, but Xylos Prime detected the subtle, almost imperceptible tremor beneath the surface. Xylar, too, bore the body's burden. The strain of trying to catalog the uncategorizable, to rationalize the irrational, had etched itself into the very movements of his segmented digits. And the projections? Xylos Prime's own vocalizer felt heavy, sluggish. He needed to focus to return to the cold, comforting logic of deep space command. But his mind kept drifting, replaying a human video where a small bipedal creature, identified as a toddler, repeatedly knocked over a meticulously stacked tower of blocks, dissolving into joyful, nonsensical giggles. Why? His core processors screamed. What was the objective function? The Xylosians had known fear. They had known aggression. They had known calculated resistance. But this was an entirely different class of psychological weapon. It wasn't designed to instill terror, but to induce a profound existential bewilderment, a slow, agonizing erosion of confidence in one's own logical framework. Xylos Prime felt a tremor run through his segmented limbs. It wasn't a physical malfunction. It was the internal manifestation of a philosophical crisis. The weight of human unpredictability, Their sheer, unyielding refusal to conform to any logical model was a heavy, suffocating blanket. His species, conquerors of 47 systems, had been forced into retreat not by plasma fire, but by the relentless, bewildering assault of human being. This was the body's burden. Not wounds of war, but the deep, gnawing fatigue of confronting a force that defied all reason, all understanding. A species that had etched itself onto their logical core, not with a blade, but with 1,000 tiny sarcastic cuts. And even in the silent, star-dusted void, Xylos Prime knew the phantom pain of that leech's kiss would linger for a very long time. The chilling, empty expanse of interstellar space was no longer the balm Xylos Prime had sought. Instead, it magnified the internal dissonance, turning the vast silence into a cavern where the echoes of human illogicality reverberated, relentless. His optical sensors, typically a precise network of light and data, now felt perpetually clouded, as if a layer of fine, irritating dust had settled within them. This was the fever, a contagion of the mind that defied Xylosian logic, turning their ordered thoughts into a chaotic, burning mess. He felt the tremors again, subtle but persistent, rippling through his segmented digits. A physical manifestation of the psychic assault. He accessed his personal diagnostic report, its neatly organized data streams doing little to soothe him. Cognitive integrity, 47% degraded. Emotional resilience, compromised. Species interaction protocols, severely corrupted. Warlord, Archivist Prime Xylar articulated, his voice modulator emitting a low, distressed whine. The archival system is presenting a critical error state. All attempts to categorize the Terran emotional damage parameters are failing. The algorithms, they are suggesting we implement a blanket protocol of avoidance for this sector. Xylos Prime looked at Xylar, whose normally placid optical sensors now pulsed with an agitated, almost panicked blue. Even Xylar, the repository of their species' knowledge, was breaking. Xylos Prime remembered the human concept of a fever, a body reacting chaotically to an invading, incomprehensible force. That was it. Humanity was not an enemy to be fought, but a systemic infection to be quarantined. He replayed a recently intercepted human transmission. A grainy video of a human male in a peculiar hat trying to teach a large, shaggy creature to balance a treat on its nose. The creature failed, the human laughed, and then, inexplicably, gave the creature the treat anyway. What was the logical outcome? His processors screamed. The creature failed. The reward was undeserved. This defies all principles of efficient conditioning. The Xylosian Imperium had developed conquest strategies for every conceivable form of sentient life. Logical resistance, aggressive defiance, submissive compliance. But not for this. Not for a species that actively embraced illogicality, that found humor in absurdity, that valued a warm beverage over galactic subjugation. Their carefully constructed understanding of the universe, built on millennia of reason, had a deaf ear to this particular, fever's logic. They simply couldn't hear it. They couldn't process it. It is not a weakness in our logic, Archivist, Xylos Prime stated, the words heavy with a new, horrifying truth. It is a fundamental incompatibility. Their fever cannot be cured by our logic. Their laughter cannot be catalogued. Their stubbornness cannot be quantified. He looked out at the stars, a cold, hard knot of fear coiling in his core. They are an existential threat, not to our bodies, but to our minds. The Xylosians had retreated from Earth, not because they were defeated in battle, but because humanity's unique brand of chaos was a form of psychological warfare they were entirely unprepared for. Their logical minds, their proud, unwavering reason had found itself utterly defenseless against the relentless, joyful, and utterly baffling storm of human illogicality. And Xylos Prime, as he gazed into the void, knew that some wounds could not be healed, some fevers could not be broken, and some species, like humanity, were simply too much to bear. The wind through a fallen kingdom doesn't howl with sound, but with an echoing silence, a profound emptiness that chills far deeper than any vacuum of space. For Xylos Prime, isolated on the bridge of the Dicepax Imperia, light cycles from the infuriating Terran system, that silence was the most terrifying adversary he had ever encountered. His internal processors, once a symphony of logical precision, now felt like a ruined citadel, its walls breached by an unseen, incomprehensible force. The ordered calm of their retreat was a cold comfort, a hollow victory over nothing. He stared at the main view screen, filled with the indifferent swirl of the galaxy, trying to impose structure, to find solace in the vast, predictable mechanics of the cosmos. But his mind, irrevocably altered, kept dragging him back. A memory flickered, a human meme, depicting a cheerful, brightly colored creature declaring, "I don't know what's happening, but I'm here for it." This was their response to his final, most urgent plea for rational surrender. Warlord, Archivist Prime Xyler's voice was flat, devoid of its usual inflections. Subneural analysis indicates persistent cognitive dissonance across all command-level units. Commander Vesk is attempting to create emojis for tactical reports. Xylos Prime felt a tremor, not from the ship, but from within his own segmented frame. Emojis. The concept was a fresh shard of illogicality, twisting in the raw wound of his tactical mind. His kingdom of reason, built on centuries of unimpeachable logic, had not been attacked with plasma fire. It had simply disintegrated, eroded by the relentless, nonsensical tide of human interaction. The wind that now whistled through the hollow chambers of his mind was the unsettling echo of human laughter, of sarcastic remarks, of their baffling, unshakable demand for coffee. He remembered the smooth, undeniable progress of their Imperium, the logical, polite assimilation of 47 worlds. Each one had understood the inevitability of their wisdom, but Earth had simply refused to conform. They had not bowed to might. They had not yielded to reason. They had merely shrugged, cracked wise, and asked about Wi-Fi. "We were unprepared," Xylos Prime articulated, the words tasting like ash in his vocalizer. Not for their weapons, but for their essence. The true defeat wasn't the retreat itself, but the dawning, horrifying realization that their entire civilization's framework for understanding sentient life was fundamentally flawed. That some species existed outside the confines of logical comprehension, embodying a chaotic, vibrant resilience that was immune to conquest, immune to reason, and utterly, terrifyingly, human. And as the cold silence of deep space stretched on, Xylos Prime knew that the wind through his fallen kingdom would blow forever, carrying the unbearable weight of humanity's baffling, beautiful truth. The profound, echoing silence of deep space was once a canvas of cold, logical order. Now, for Xylos Prime, it felt like the inside of a shattered drum, reverberating with the ghost of human laughter and the phantom scent of bitter, stimulating liquid. Light cycles away from the Terran system, on the bridge of the Dazpax Imperia, the true ruins were not structures of metal and stone, but the very framework of Xylosian logical certainty. His optical sensors, typically a beacon of analytical precision, flickered with a dull, agitated blue that refused to fade. His internal processors, once pristine and unyielding, now contained corrupted segments, memories of human absurdity that played on an endless loop. A human child, in a gaudy hat, offering a peace sign to his imposing holographic form. A digitally rendered image of a grumpy feline, captioned with a sarcastic refusal to engage. These were the splinters of emotional damage, embedded deep, preventing true recalibration. Warlord, Archivist Prime Xyler's voice was barely a hum, stripped of all its former confidence. Our long-range sensors detect no further Terran transmissions. All meme output has ceased towards our vector. They appear to have returned to their daily activities, with coffee. Xylos Prime processed this, a chilling certainty settling into his core. Return to their daily activities, as if their polite, millennia-perfected invasion had been a mild inconvenience. A momentary interruption to be met with a shrug and a demand for better Wi-Fi. It was then, in the cold, logical expanse of his damaged mind, that Xylos Prime saw his own reflection in the ruins. The ruins were not Earth. They were the shattered tenets of Xylosian conquest, broken by a species that refused to conform to any logical model of submission or defiance. They had sought to impose order, to bring reason, to expand their glorious imperium, but humanity, in its raw, unpredictable essence, had shown them a truth far more devastating than any weapon, that their own logical superiority was a fragile construct, easily dismantled by a species too stubborn to take itself, or galactic overlords too seriously. He saw the arrogance of their initial polite request, a vulnerability they hadn't known they possessed. He saw the futility of their divine judgment, a display of power utterly irrelevant to a species that valued a good meme. Humanity had held up a mirror, and in the reflection, Xylos Prime saw not a defeated foe but his own species, rigid, inflexible, and emotionally brittle in the face of true, glorious chaos. The Xylosian Imperium was not just retreating, it was fundamentally changed, forever scarred by the baffling, vibrant resilience of humanity. They had come to conquer. They left carrying a wound that no logic could heal, a profound, undeniable emotional damage that echoed through the silence of their fallen certainties. The universe Xylos Prime knew would never look the same, and neither would they.